Hi, it's Colin Coward. I started The Volume to bring you some of the most authentic voices in sports. While you're here, make sure you hit subscribe. Thanks.
Really quick, short video today. I just wanted to go over my All-NBA teams for this season. But before we get into that, I wanted to hit on 2 points because they both kind of frame my approach to how I built this list. First of all, there's a reason why I favor the proven, established guys in the league with lists like this. Because more often than not, when you actually dig into the film and you put everything in context, there are usually very good reasons why one player in one situation might be having a very successful season, why another player might be having a season that's not as statistically impressive. And I'll give you the example that I used last night with Kevin Durant. He explained how he hasn't had 60 points in a game because of the way that teams guard him. He doesn't get a ton of easy shots. Almost everything that he gets over the course of an NBA game for him is very much a grind. It's a lot of dealing with double teams and operating for minutes at a time, just absorbing defensive attention until you might get an opportunity to get a shot off. The example that I would use is Devin Booker. When I'm comparing, if I'm trying to consider a guard forward for All-NBA, and I'm looking at a guy like Steph Curry and what he does for the Warriors, and a guy like Devin Booker and what he does for the Suns, it's easy to look at Devin Booker's case and be like, he's averaging 26 points a game, he's shooting really good percentages, his team has the best record in the league, Devin Booker should be on the first team. But the context of that situation is the coverage that Steph Curry deals with on a night in, night out basis doesn't even remotely resemble what Devin Booker has to deal with. When Devin Booker is on the floor with Chris Paul and with Cam Johnson and with Mikal Bridges and with DeAndre Ayton, he's, yes, he's probably the lead item on the scouting report, but they can't devote too many resources to stopping Devin Booker because there's too much talent on the floor. If you watch the Golden State Warriors, they rely heavily on Steph to create everything. And so he is getting doubled on every single screen and roll. He's getting trapped and doubled off the ball a lot of the time. The amount of defensive attention devoted to Steph Curry doesn't even resemble what Devin Booker sees. And so when I'm weighing those two situations, I'm going to favor a guy like Steph Curry, who not only is a more playoff-proven player, who not only has a longer track record of success, but is dealing with a much harder level of difficulty for what he's accomplishing on the floor. Steph Curry is still averaging 26 points per game this year on 60% true shooting, despite the fact that he sees a level of coverage that Devin Booker probably never will. And so that's going to be a huge part of something that you'll see as we're working through the list. I'm going to favor established guys, and I'm going to take into context the degree of difficulty with what they've been dealing with this season. The second thing that I wanted to hit on really quick was the idea of advanced metrics. And a little disclaimer up front here. I have no problem with anybody who works in the analytic field and with people that favor advanced metrics. I don't have a big enough ego to sit here and pretend like my view of the game is the only accurate view of the game. What I'm about to say has everything to do with just the way that I view the game. I actually admire and have a ton of respect for the people out there that would like to try to create a metric that can capture what an individual player does to impact a basketball game. The idea behind it is they want to remove subjectivity, right? If I tell you I think KD's better than Giannis, there's a huge subjectivity element to that. But if there was a perfect metric that existed that could accurately measure an individual player's impact, it removes subjectivity, right? So I understand the motivation for why people that work in analytics try to do that. For me personally, though, the phrase I use is basketball blasphemy. I think it is literally impossible to quantify, even remotely accurately, what an individual player does to impact the game of basketball. The game of basketball, and I've been around it my whole life, and so have so many of you guys, it is such an incredibly complex organism. Not even just within a specific game. Every single basketball game is different. Every team plays a different style. Every handful of seasons, the entire style of basketball that takes place in the NBA shifts in one direction or another. So even if you could somehow take this incredibly complex organism and simplify it down to a single metric, by the time you did it, the game would have changed on you and it would have been irrelevant. And so I understand and respect the folks out there who take those stats seriously and who apply them to their decision making. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just telling you, for me personally, I'm not interested in that. There is nothing that an individual metric that tries to encapsulate the entire game of basketball. There's nothing that metric could tell me that I wouldn't better learn by watching the games. And I put in the work to watch the games. And so I will, for me personally, that's the way I'm going to make these decisions. I love specific things in the world of advanced metrics and advanced stat keeping and things along those lines. For instance, like, I love what Synergy does to split up play types and look at, here's every pick and roll with the guy dribbling to the right with the guy rolling to the rim versus popping to the three-point line. When you can focus on a specific play type, that information becomes very valuable to me. But in the entire organism of 5-on-5 basketball, the idea of trying to simplify that down to a single number to me is blasphemous to the game of basketball. So again, no disrespect to the people who think that way. You're just not going to get that type of approach from me. My approach is always going to be watching the games and looking at specific statistics that are more measurable and a little bit easier for us to view in the objectivity of it all. So let's get started with the All-NBA team. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read my teams out first. And then after I finish reading the teams out, I'm going to explain some specific choices that I had to make. So on the first team, I had Steph, Luka Doncic, Kevin Durant, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Nikola Jokic. On the second team, I had Morant, Devin Booker, LeBron James, Jayson Tatum, and Joel Embiid. And then on the third team, I had Trae Young, Chris Paul, DeMar DeRozan, Jimmy Butler, and Karl Anthony Towns. So the first one that's going to stand out to you is the fact that I have Steph Curry over Devin Booker or Morant, two guys that operated on better teams this year and two guys that had very, very impressive statistical seasons. And this is why I did that whole rant at the beginning of this video. Stephen Curry averaged 26 points on 60% true shooting this year. Is that a decline from when he was at his prime? Absolutely. I've laid that out in detail. Basically, for the second half of the season, he shot about 10% worse from three than he did during the second half of last season. There is absolutely, unquestionably a drop-off from Steph Curry. But that drop-off still has him better at basketball than both of those guys. That's just how insanely good Steph was. And it's important to acknowledge that 26 points on 60% true shooting that Steph has put out this year has been within the context of the same coverages he faced when he was at his peak. Every ball screen's a trap. When he's flying around off ball, defenses will err on the side of stopping Steph, sometimes sending two bodies to him while he's cutting through to the corner while a guy cuts right under the basket for a dunk. His ability to weaponize that attention to get easy looks for his teammates is far and away a more valuable playmaking skill than either of what Devin Booker or Morant bring to the table. So yes, Steph has had a down year. Yes, because of his injuries, the team has performed worse than those two guys' teams. But is Steph Curry better at basketball still than Morant and Devin Booker? Yes. Did Steph Curry have a better season this year in terms of winning impact than Morant and Devin Booker? Absolutely. So he's first team NBA for All-NBA for me. And that same ideology is going to continue down the list. The reason why I have KD first team and Jayson Tatum second team is because KD is a better basketball player than Jayson Tatum, who, while he was available this year, did more to impact winning. And the types of coverages that he sees are more complex than what Jayson Tatum sees. Just in this last run, here in the last month or so, Tatum is starting to get doubled just about everywhere on the floor. That's what Kevin Durant's been seeing for the better part of a decade. And so yes, while Jayson Tatum's season on its surface is a more impressive season in terms of the way the team performed, and in some individual counting stats, Kevin Durant had a better season and did more to impact winning. I have Kevin Durant over Jayson Tatum on that first team. Then we get to the Jokic and Embiid thing. So everybody has a different approach to this kind of stuff. It's similar to the MVP. And both Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic were listed as forwards. My approach to All-NBA has been, I want it to resemble a normal basketball team. And yes, if you had Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic on your roster, you could get away with playing them together. I don't want to undersell that by any stretch of the imagination. But you would never have a team with both of them on the floor together. The overall foot speed is too slow and they'd get run off the floor. And so I kind of narrowed it down to I had to have one guy out of that pairing on the first team. And I went with Nikola Jokic. I thought he had a better season. I thought he won at a higher rate with less talent than Joel Embiid did. And again, this is where the subjectivity comes in. I value playmaking a lot more than most people do. Because I think that when push comes to shove, especially at the end of games and in postseason series, your ability to make defenses pay for sending multiple bodies at you is arguably the most important skill. It's a big thing that's held Joel Embiid back over the years. It's a big thing that's held Anthony Davis back over the years. So for me personally, I think Embiid's a better defensive player. I think he's a little bit better scorer, but I think Jokic is a monumentally better playmaker. And for me, that was a big difference maker in this one. The other one I wanted to put out there was LeBron on the second team. So I don't know where he'll finish. I wouldn't be surprised if he finished third team. I've heard people like Bill Simmons and Tim Bontemps, of course, Boston guys, say that they might leave LeBron off the ballot altogether. And my thing is, I'm a big believer in punishing guys for not making the playoffs. That's why I would have him second team, even though he's clearly been one of the 5 best players in basketball this year. But that's the important context. LeBron James has clearly been one of the 5 best basketball players in the world this year. He's been playing with significantly less talent than just about anybody in the league. And I don't need to get into the weeds of all of the ways that Laker team has handicapped itself. But in terms of just LeBron's individual ability that he brought to the table, he might get the scoring title. He's been one of the best scorers in all of basketball this year. His defense hasn't been great, but it's been good for stretches. And I can't blame him for the way that the team has gone south because it mostly has to do with external factors. Now, are we talking about LeBron the GM? Because LeBron the GM deserves a ton of criticism for the way this went this year. It was him that pushed for the Russell Westbrook trade. He was flat out wrong about that. It was a disaster. But in terms of strictly basketball, I thought LeBron was a top 5 player in the world this year. And because of him missing the playoffs, I dropped him to second team. I can't drop him any lower than that. He's been too good on the court this year. And then lastly, Devin Booker and DeMar DeRozan. That was a tough one for me. I ended up going with Booker on second team. DeRozan is every bit as good when you factor in his ability to play make. Like I said, I value playmaking more than a lot of people. I would say that Booker is a better closer. And then the other big thing is I always include playoff success in these types of conversations. DeMar DeRozan has never had a playoff run like Devin Booker did last year. DeMar DeRozan has never had a playoff game like a handful of games that Devin Booker had in the DeMar DeRozan has never had a playoff game like a handful of games that Devin Booker had in the NBA Finals last year, especially in the middle of the series. Some of the shot making that he demonstrated shooting over the top of Drew Holiday was incredibly impressive. So even though DeMar DeRozan has arguably been more valuable to the Bulls, even though I think he might be a hair better at basketball because of his playmaking, that postseason success combined with how well the Suns have played this year, I ended up giving the edge to Devin Booker there. So again, really quickly, Steph, Luka, KD, Giannis, and Jokic on first team. Ja Morant, Booker, LeBron, Tatum, Embiid on second team. Trae Young, CP3, DeMar DeRozan, Jimmy Butler, and Karl Anthony Towns on the third team.